The second woman rose before Ruth Talbot finished reading the promise of marriage. And that was when Josephine Avery understood the evening had been arranged. Ruth still stood beneath the harvest banner, with Tobias Mercer's supposed letter trembling in her hand. Across the crowded Morrow Flats hall, Mrs. Dace pushed back her chair and lifted a page of her own. "He wrote the same to me." A third woman followed, then a fourth. By the time 6 letters lay open beneath the kerosene lamps, the fiddle had stopped, the roast beef had gone cold, and every face in the room had turned toward the rancher near the center aisle. Tobias did not reach for any of the pages. He stood with his hat in one hand and the other loose at his side. "I wrote none of them," he said. Ruth's expression tightened. "You remembered the blue ribbon I wore at the spring sale." "I don't remember seeing it." The plainness of the answer wounded her more than a gentler lie would have. Beside the platform, Celia Dwyer lifted her chin. Each of these women received a note saying Mr. Mercer would clarify his intentions tonight. Ruth turned toward her. "Your note told me to bring his letter and hear him choose." "Mine said the same," Mrs. Dace said. The other women confirmed it one by one. Celia had summoned each of them separately. None had known the others would arrive carrying the same promise. A murmur traveled through the room, sharp with embarrassment and anger. Fathers shifted closer to daughters. Merchants leaned together. Horace Dwyer, owner of the Morrow Flats Weekly and the busiest job press in Ford County, mounted the low platform as though the public humiliation belonged to him. "There is no cause for disorder," he said. "A lonely man may write too warmly and regret it when called to account." Tobias's gaze settled on him. "I said I did not write them, and 6 respectable women say otherwise. They say the letters bear my name." Horace spread his hands, a distinction without comfort. Josephine stood near the subscription table, with the supper ledger beneath one arm and her work portfolio under the other. She should have remained where Horace had placed her. He paid her wages. Most of her tools sat in his press office. Hattie Weller had already warned that kindness did not pay for an attic room forever. Then Mrs. Dace shoved her letter across the table, and Josephine saw the capital M. A shallow bite scarred the upper left stem. The same flaw marked Mercer on Ruth's page. No pen made the same wound twice. Type did. "May I examine 2 of them?" Josephine asked. Horace's head snapped toward her. "Miss Avery, return to the subscription ledger. This concerns printing. It concerns private correspondence, not if the words came from a press." Ruth drew her letter against her bodice. Mrs. Dace pushed hers closer. "Use mine. I want to know whether he made a fool of me." Josephine did not answer pain with comfort she could not prove. She asked Ruth, "May I place yours beside it?" Ruth hesitated, then laid the page down, while keeping 2 fingers over the lower corner. Permission with a boundary. Josephine honored both. Under the lamp the lines ended in the same places. The word lonely broke at the same measure. A small star ornament leaned backward at the bottom of each sheet, because the type had been set in reverse. Josephine had corrected that mistake often enough in Horace's job case to know it by shape alone. "The bodies were set once," she said. "They were not written separately." Someone laughed near the rear wall. "A woman can copy words." "So can a man," Josephine replied. "Metal copies its own defects." She pointed without touching Ruth's page. "The capital M is damaged in both. The star is reversed in both. The line endings match." The signatures were added after printing. Tobias stepped nearer, then stopped across the table. "How can you tell?" "Your name beneath the text shows no natural pressure. The flourish was copied from a model." "You've seen my hand?" "Only on public cattle notices." Horace descended from the platform. "That is enough. Miss Avery has mistaken long employment for authority." His voice warmed with contempt. "Now she means to turn 6 women's embarrassment into a bid for Mr. Mercer's notice." Heat rose along Josephine's face, but her hands remained steady. "Then let the paper answer instead of my character." She drew her portfolio closer. A corner of the spoiled proof showed beneath the flap. Horace saw it. His hand moved. Tobias moved once. He stepped between Horace and the portfolio without touching Josephine, the proof, or the older man. No threat, no raised voice. Only a body placed where another man's reach had to stop. "The paper remains hers," Tobias said. Horace stared at him. "You would take a printer girl's word over 6 women. That is not what she asked. Tobias turned his attention to Josephine. Not past her, not through her. Will you show me? The room waited. Josephine could close the portfolio and preserve whatever wages Horace still owed. She could let the town decide Tobias was faithless and the women foolish. She could protect herself by allowing a larger lie to live. Instead, she drew out the spoiled proof. A diagonal smear crossed the lower corner. The same chipped M stood in the first line. The same reverse star marked the bottom. These women were not courted, Josephine said. They were selected. Ruth's fingers tightened on her letter. Selected for what? Josephine looked from the 6 pages to Celia, then to Horace. Someone wanted all of you to confront him together. Celia's expression held, but color rose above her collar. Horace reached for authority as other men reached for a weapon. You are dismissed, Miss Avery. Effective now. Leave every company paper on this table. This proof is not yours. It came from my press. It came from my labor. Then your labor will condemn you. Josephine turned the sheet over. Near the lower edge, half hidden beneath the ink smear, 2 grease pencil initials showed through. J.A. her mark. Her hand. The room no longer asked only who had printed 6 false promises. It asked why the first lie carried Josephine Avery's name. Outside, the Kansas wind worried the hall door. Inside, no one moved. Horace still owned the press that would tell Morrow Flats what happened by morning, and Josephine had handed him a headline, sharpened with her initials. By sunrise, Horace Dwyer had printed Josephine's disgrace in letters large enough to read from the street. Hattie Weller set the newspaper beside Josephine's untouched coffee and kept one hand on the table as if the headline might shove the room off balance. Printer Gila's accusation disrupts harvest supper. The article claimed Josephine had invented a tale of forged letters to force herself into Tobias Mercer's notice. It mentioned her initials twice. It did not mention the damaged capital M, the reversed star, the matching line breaks, or the fact that Celia Dwyer had summoned 6 women separately. I can give you the attic room through Thursday next, Hattie said. After that, I need money coming through the door. Josephine folded the paper until Horace's headline disappeared. You do not owe me charity. Good, I am not offering it. Hattie pulled out the chair across from her. Dwyer has already warned the grocer and the harness maker that any printing sent through this house will be treated as support for slander. Then he means to starve me before I can answer. He means to starve us both. Josephine opened her portfolio and checked the spoiled proof. Still flat, still intact. The diagonal smear crossed the lower corner, and J.A. remained visible beneath it. Her mother's brass composing stick rested wrapped inside her satchel. Most of her other tools remained in Horace's shop. A knock sounded at the front door. Hattie returned with Tobias Mercer and Eli Ransom. Tobias removed his hat before entering. Eli, gray-haired and narrow-eyed, stopped near the door with the posture of a man accustomed to measuring strangers before trusting them. Eli Ransom, he said. Foreman at Ironlark. Josephine Avery. I know. Hattie pointed at 2 chairs. Sit unless ranch business improves when conducted standing in another person's dining room. Eli sat. Tobias took the chair across from Josephine, leaving the table between them. He placed no money before her, no promise of shelter. Instead, he set 3 folded notes beside Horace's newspaper. Those are mine, he said. Written to a cattle buyer, my seed supplier, and Eli. Eli grunted. The last one complains about salt. It records that you bought the wrong kind. I bought what the store had. Josephine did not touch the notes. What do you want from me? I want to know who produced the letters, who mailed them, and why they used my name. That is work. Yes, paid work. Yes. Then we begin with terms. She drew a clean sheet from her portfolio and dipped Hattie's pen into the ink. Weekly wages paid every Saturday. Agreed. I remain here, not at Ironlark. Eli's brows rose. Tobias said, agreed. The proof remains in my custody. So do my notes. Agreed. You examine either only when I place them before you. Agreed. Any access I receive to Ironlark records must be written and witnessed. I will not be accused later of entering private papers without leave. Agreed. Josephine wrote the next line more slowly. I decide when my former employment and my role in the first setting become public. Tobias's jaw tightened. Your initials already are. My initials are public. The truth attached to them is not yours to give away. He held her gaze. Agreed. You tell me every offer Horace has made involving Iron Lark. Written, spoken, friendly, threatening, or disguised as concern. Eli turned toward Tobias but remained silent. Agreed, Tobias said at last. Josephine slid the page across the table. Then sign. He did. His handwriting leaned forward, firm and spare, with no decorative sweep beneath his name. Josephine signed below him. Hattie and Eli added their names as witnesses. Only then did she reach for the notes. Tobias passed the first across the table. Their fingers brushed along the folded edge. Warm contact, brief enough to deny, clear enough to notice. Tobias released the paper first and left his hand open on the table. Josephine chose to take the note. She unfolded all three beside the transcription Ruth had permitted her to make and the measurements from the two originals she had examined. Your written name moves forward, she said. The false signature sits too evenly. Every copy has the same width and no change in pressure. Whoever made it likely used a small facsimile stamp taken from a printed example. A man can steal a signature from an advertisement, Eli asked. A likeness of one, if he has a clean model. Tobias looked toward Horace's newspaper. We printed cattle sale circulars in April. Did you sign a proof one? Who kept it? Dyer's shop kept a clean copy for its job file. Iron Lark kept several circulars and the signed proof. Josephine folded Tobias's note. Then we examined both sets. Tobias rested his forearms on the table. Horace wants Southcut. What is Southcut? A deeded strip of Iron Lark. It shortens the route from several ranges to the proposed loading pens. Has he offered money? Yes. Have you refused? Yes. Josephine heard the space around the answer. Is that the whole truth? Tobias did not look away. It is all I'm ready to swear to. Readiness is not honesty. No. Then we already have a difficulty, I know. Before she could press further, someone knocked hard enough to rattle the front glass. A post office boy stood outside with a sealed envelope in one hand. Mr. Ransom, he said when Hattie opened the door. Postmaster thought you might still be here. This came for Mr. Mercer on the morning sack. Eli checked the address and passed it to Tobias. Tobias Mercer, Iron Lark Ranch. The Morrow Flats postmark read October 4th. Anything unusual? Josephine asked the boy. He shifted his cap. Postage was charged to Dwyer Printing and Land Company's account, same as their commercial packets. Who brought it to the counter? I didn't see. Postmaster keeps the account book. Tobias broke the seal and read. His face became still. He handed the sheet to Josephine. The body began, "My dear Miss Clara Fenwick," and promised that Tobias would speak privately of marriage before the month ended. The letter carried the date October 6th, 2 days ahead. Josephine examined the page, the same damaged M, the same reverse star. Beneath the text, Tobias's signature repeated with the flat sameness of a stamped image. Who is Clara Fenwick? He asked. I do not know. Then why was her letter sent to me? Josephine studied the envelope again. The outer address was deliberate. This is not Clara's delivered letter. It is a warning copy. A warning of what? That another woman can be named whenever they choose. Hattie drew a breath. Eli's expression hardened. Tobias touched the future date. Was it printed after last night? The postmark proves it entered the mail today. The account may tell us who presented it. The date inside shows someone planned when it should appear. None of that proves when the press ran. She returned the sheet, but it proves the scheme did not end when the 6 women stood up. Tobias folded the warning copy along its existing crease. Who keeps it? You do. It was addressed to you. Josephine opened her notebook and recorded the postmark, paper, defects, wording, and Dwyer account charge without taking the original. Someone had not merely forged courtship. Someone had sent Tobias proof that his name could be used again on demand through an account controlled by the very office now printing Josephine's disgrace. By Friday morning, the warning copy had become more dangerous than the 6 letters because it had been sent to the one man it was meant to control. Josephine spread her notes across Hattie Weller's dining table while Tobias kept the original envelope beside his left hand. He had not offered it to her again. She had not asked him to surrender it. Ruth Talbot's authorized transcription lay between his genuine notes and the measurements Josephine had taken from the 2 originals at the supper. The signature is the same size in every forged example, Josephine said. Same width, same flourish, no pressure change. Eli Ransom stood near the stove with his arms folded. You're certain it was stamped? I am certain it was not written separately each time. A small facsimile stamp would explain the sameness. Tobias tapped one of his genuine notes, and the model came from the cattle circular. Possibly, not proved. Josephine turned to a blank sheet. I need the invoice, the job record, the retained copies, and the names of every person who handled them. You'll have them. In writing. Tobias took Hattie's pen. He wrote authority for Josephine Avery to examine all Iron Lark records connected to the April cattle sale circular and any printing performed by Dwyer's shop. He added that Eli could open locked ranch files in his absence. Hattie witnessed the paper. Josephine folded it once and placed it in her portfolio beside the smudged proof. We ride now, Tobias asked. After I ask one more question. He waited. Who knew you signed the proof? Ellie Dwyer. Whoever worked the job. Celia? I don't know. Then today we separate what you know from what you assumed. The 8-mile ride to Iron Lark took a little over an hour. October wind pressed dry grass flat along the road, and a freight whistle carried from Morrow Flats before the town dropped behind them. Tobias did not fill the distance with questions. Josephine was grateful for that. She used the time to consider the chain, a public signature, a private body, 6 recipient lines, 1 warning copy, and a company account that tied the mailings to Dwyer's office without yet naming the hand at the counter. Iron Lark's office stood off the ranch house, plain and square, with a high window facing the corrals. Eli opened the record chest and brought out the April invoice. Josephine checked the entries line by line. 20 cattle sale circulars, 1 signed proof, 1 clean shop copy retained by Dwyer's press for its job archive. Where are the ranch copies? She asked. Eli opened the file drawer, empty. Tobias searched the shelf above it, then the cabinet beneath the desk. Nothing. They were here in June, Eli said. I used one to settle an argument over sale dates. Who entered this office after June? Josephine asked. Eli listed ranch hands, a feed merchant, the veterinarian, and Dwyer's apprentice. Nate Colby came for final corrections before the spring run, he said. 19 thin boy. Ink always on his cuffs. How long was he alone? 10 minutes. 15 at most. Tobias's attention hardened. Enough time to take the proof. Enough time to see it, Josephine corrected. Access is not guilt. She examined the invoice again. The shop copy mattered more than the missing ranch copies, because Horace had lawful possession of it from the beginning. Did Nate carry anything when he left? A leather job case, Eli said. That was normal, Josephine wrote the answer. Then we do not accuse him. Tobias leaned one hip against the desk. You think Dwyer used the shop copy. I think Dwyer had a clean model without needing to steal from this room. The missing ranch copies may be concealment, or they may be carelessness. Until we know who moved them, they prove only absence. A horse entered the yard at a fast trot. Celia Dwyer dismounted before the ranch hand reached her. She wore a dark riding skirt and carried a flat leather case against her side. Tobias, she called. We need to speak before this nonsense spreads farther. She stopped when she saw Josephine at the office door. You brought her here. I hired her, Tobias said. Celia's gaze moved to his coat. Then I suppose she has already examined the letter addressed to you and written to Clara. No one answered at once. The warning copy had not been printed in Horace's paper. Hattie knew. Eli knew. The post office boy knew it had arrived, but not the body salutation. Josephine stepped down from the office threshold. How did you learn the name inside? Celia tightened her hold on the case. My father hears things. From whom? People talk. The sheet never left Tobias's possession. Then perhaps he told someone. Tobias's voice remained level. I did not tell you, Celia turned on him. You are letting a dismissed compositor drag your name through town while 6 women are humiliated. End it. Choose one, deny the others, and let the matter die. That would require me to lie. Men have survived worse. The women shouldn't have to. The answer struck harder than anger. Celia's face changed, then smoothed. The investors arrive soon. You cannot hold up the stock pens because one strip of land has become a test of pride. Josephine watched the leather case slip against Celia's glove. A folded prospectus showed at the opening. "May I see that circular?" she asked. No, Tobias did not reach for it. "Is it public?" he asked. "It is an investor prospectus." Then, refusing to show it says more than showing it. Celia drew the sheet out and slapped it against the hitching rail. Josephine did not touch it until Celia stepped back. At the top stood Dwyer Land and Stock Company. Horace Dwyer, principal promoter. Celia Dwyer, subscription secretary. Below, a line promised commission upon completed subscriptions. The route map ran from the proposed loading pens across a narrow band marked South Cut. Near the bottom, the capital M carried the same shallow bite. A decorative star leaned backward. "Your father's press," Josephine said. "Of course it is, the same damage type." Celia laughed without warmth. "A chipped letter proves a printer owns old type. It proves the courtship bodies, and this prospectus came from the same shop." Voices gathered near the main gate. 2 neighboring ranchers had stopped on the road, followed by a wagon from town. Rumor traveled faster than a horse when shame pulled it. One man called, "Mercer, is she here to prove the letters or collect on one?" Josephine's spine stiffened. Tobias walked to the gate before the words could draw a crowd closer. "Josephine Avery is here under written authority to examine Iron Lark records," he said. "She is not applying for marriage. She is investigating fraud committed in my name." The rancher glanced toward Celia. "That so?" "That is so," Tobias replied. No charm, no apology for Josephine's presence. Her professional role, stated where others could hear it. A man on the lower gate rail shifted to get a better view, jarring the post beneath Josephine's hand. Her boot slipped on the packed dirt. Tobias reached but stopped short of touching her. "May I?" Yes, his hand closed around her elbow, firm enough to steady, gone as soon as both boots found ground. Celia saw the permission. So did the men at the gate. Josephine returned to the prospectus. The route, the commission, the damaged M, and the warning copy now belonged to one widening design. The same press had printed the lie that made Tobias desirable and the prospectus that made his land profitable. The question was no longer whether Horace's shop stood behind both. It was who inside that shop had turned type, postage, and public longing into a weapon, and whether Nate Colby had been the hand or merely the next person Horace meant to use. By Monday morning, Horace Dwyer had printed Josephine's name often enough that strangers felt entitled to speak it as an accusation. She crossed Morrow Flats with her portfolio beneath one arm and Tobias Mercer half a pace behind, not escorting her so much as serving as the witness she had chosen. Sunday had given Horace time to close his shop ledger, move whatever papers he feared, and tell half the town that a dismissed compositor meant to steal company property. It had given Josephine time to list every tool that belonged to her. She entered the press office without knocking. The familiar room smelled of ink, hot metal, and damp paper. Horace stood beside the stone with Celia at the subscription desk. Nate Colby worked near the type cases, shoulders drawn tight beneath an ink-marked shirt. He glanced at Josephine once and lowered his eyes. "You were dismissed," Horace said. "I came for wages earned through Wednesday evening and tools that were mine before I entered this shop. You damaged stock, drove away subscriptions, and carried off a proof." Josephine set a written inventory on the counter. "Then record each deduction and give me a receipt." Tobias remained by the door. He did not speak. His stillness deprived Horace of the quarrel he wanted. Horace opened the cash drawer and counted coins with insulting care. $3.40. Less spoiled paper, lost work, and the supper account. "The supper account was not my debt. It became yours when you disrupted it. Write that." Horace's fingers stopped. "Write what?" "That you deducted wages because I identified a forged printing job in public." Celia's mouth tightened. Horace shoved the money across the counter. "Take it or leave it." Josephine counted the coins, then wrote beneath her inventory. Partial payment received October 8, 1888. Balance disputed. She signed her name and held the pen toward Horace. He refused it. "Mr. Mercer and Miss Dwyer are present," she said. "They can witness that you declined." Celia rose. "Do not drag me into your grievance. You were already in the room." Josephine moved to the cabinet beneath her old case. One by one she removed the tools she had purchased or inherited. Bodkin, tweezers, spacing rule, composing key, and the brass composing stick wrapped in worn blue cloth. Horace reached across the cabinet door. That stays. Josephine unfolded the cloth. 2 shallow initials marked the handle. M.A. My mother's. You used it on company work. Use does not change ownership. Neither do initials scratched after the fact. Josephine's hand went cold around the brass. Her mother had taught her to set type before fever took the strength from her fingers. That memory belonged to no employer. Celia stepped around the desk. Let me see it. No. Celia seized the far end anyway. Josephine did not release it. For one taut second, they held the same tool. Then Celia wrenched sideways. The composing stick slipped free, struck the iron edge of the stone, and spun onto the floor. The thumbscrew bent beneath the blow. Tobias took one step. Josephine raised her palm. He stopped. No argument, no display. Only obedience to the boundary she set while anger sharpened his face. Josephine bent and picked up the composing stick herself. The screw would not turn. Nate had gone motionless by the cases. Horace said, "Clumsy things break." Celia threw it, Tobias said. His voice was level enough to carry. I saw her. Celia's color rose. She pulled first. I saw what happened. He offered no threat, no demand for apology. He gave Josephine a clean witness and nothing that could be called ownership. She wrapped the damaged tool, placed it in her satchel, and closed the cabinet. My inventory is complete. Horace leaned over the counter. The proof is still company property. Then bring a claim in writing. You think Mercer's name protects you? Josephine lifted her portfolio. His name did not print my initials. Mine did. She had carried fear into the room, but she would not let fear decide which part of the record another person was permitted to own or alter. She walked out before Horace could turn the sentence against her. By the time the light wagon reached Iron Lark, the October sun had thinned behind a veil of dust. Tobias had driven the 8 miles without asking why Josephine kept touching the wrapped tool inside her satchel. In the ranch office, he cleared one end of the desk and set down a small oil bottle, a narrow vise, and 2 files. May I examine the screw? He asked. Josephine unwrapped the composing stick but kept one hand over it. You may straighten the thumbscrew. Do not force the brass. Do not remove any type. Do not turn it to read the line. Stop when I tell you. Agreed. If it cannot be repaired without breaking it, leave it bent. Tobias adjusted the vise so the jaws held the screw and not the handle. He worked in small movements, easing the metal instead of fighting it. Josephine watched his hands. They were rancher's hands, scarred across the knuckles and darkened by rains, yet he handled the old brass as though force were a debt that required permission. The type inside the stick faced him backward. He never tilted it toward the light. You could read it if you turned it, Josephine said. I could. You want to know what it says? Yes. Then why not look? He tested the screw, stopped, and met her gaze. They weren't set for me. The answer moved through her without haste. He had been denied control of his own name, yet he would not take control of words that belonged to her. Tobias loosened the vise. Try it. Josephine placed her thumb on the repaired screw. It turned with slight resistance, then held. His fingers remained beneath the handle while hers rested above. Brass warmed between them. Neither hand moved at once. Josephine felt the steadiness of him through a tool her mother had once guided under her own smaller fingers. She withdrew first. Tobias let the composing stick settle fully into her palm. It will hold, he said. Do you want the line left where it is? Josephine looked at the reversed type. She had known its shape before she read it. Still, knowledge became heavier when given form. She loosened the screw, slid the line free, and turned it upright on the blotter. My dear miss, the opening Horace had handed her as one private courtship letter. The spacing matched the smudged proof inside her portfolio. A crescent of dried ink darkened the shoulder of the damaged M. Tobias did not touch it. You set that line, he said. Yes. When did you know there was more than one recipient? After I saw 6 address slips beside the galley. Before the supper? 4 days before. The admission stripped the room of warmth. Tobias's jaw tightened, but he waited. Josephine folded a clean sheet around the type line, wrote October 8, 1888 and J.A. across the seam, then placed the packet inside her portfolio beside the proof. Horace said the slips belonged to invitations for another job. He ordered me to break the type and burn the spoiled proof. You did neither. No, why? Josephine closed the portfolio. Because by then I knew the job was not what he had called it. That is not the same as telling me why you stayed silent. No. Tobias looked toward the packet now hidden from view. Will you tell me? Before Horace tells it for me. It was a promise, not an answer. Outside, cattle struck the corral rails and a hired hand called across the yard. Inside, Josephine had preserved the first line, admitted the date of her suspicion, and still withheld the choice that had allowed 4 days of silence. Celia had bent her mother's tool. Horace had bent her labor into accusation. The next truth might decide whether Tobias believed Josephine had resisted the lie, or merely waited to see what it would buy. By Wednesday evening, October 10th, the 3 women who came to Hattie Weller's back parlor had already paid for the truth in ways no ledger could show. Ruth Talbot carried her original letter inside a stiff paper sleeve. Mrs. Dace kept hers folded beneath one gloved hand. Miss Warren held hers upright on her lap, as if lowering it might surrender more than paper. 3 other recipients had not come. One had refused any public involvement. One allowed Josephine to compare dates and line breaks without using her name. The last had sent no answer at all. Josephine respected each decision. She placed no empty chairs for them. Tobias waited on the front porch because Josephine had asked him to. Through the closed door came only the faint scrape of his boot when he shifted his weight. Inside, Hattie poured coffee and took the chair nearest the hall. Josephine set her portfolio on the table. The smudged proof remained inside. So did the packet containing the first line of type. She did not take either out at once. Before we begin, she said, your letters remain yours. I will not keep them. I will not show them to anyone you have not approved. If you want to leave, you leave with the original in your own hand. Mrs. Dace's mouth tightened. Horace says you are keeping evidence because you mean to bargain with Mercer. Horace says many things from a press I no longer work for. That does not answer me. No, this does. Josephine opened the portfolio just far enough to show the edge of the spoiled proof, and the sealed packet marked October 8, 1888, J.A. I kept the proof because my initials were on it, and because Horace ordered it destroyed. I kept the first line because I said it. Neither belongs to Tobias. Ruth glanced toward the door. Does he know? He knows I set the opening line. He does not know every choice I made after that. And yet he hired you, under written terms. Do you want him? Ruth asked. The question entered the room more sharply than accusation. Miss Warren lowered her eyes. Mrs. Dace did not. Josephine could have denied the attraction and made herself easier to trust. A smaller lie might have bought a little comfort. What I want from Tobias Mercer is not the measure of these letters, she said. I notice him, that is true. It does not change the broken M, the reversed star, or the fact that Celia summoned each of you separately. Ruth's voice thinned. Then perhaps you understand why I believed mine. Josephine did not interrupt. It knew about the blue ribbon, Ruth continued. It knew I had stopped wearing black every day. It said a woman who had spent years being sensible deserved one reckless happiness. Her hand tightened around the paper sleeve. I thought the words proved someone had seen me. Now I do not know whether I imagined every kindness that came before them. You did not imagine your own judgment, Josephine said. Someone studied what would sound true and built the lie to fit it. A lie designed to be believed does not make the person who believed it foolish. Ruth's breathing eased, though the pain remained. Celia wrote that I should bring the letter to the supper, she said. She said Tobias meant to speak plainly at last. Mrs. Dace nodded. My note said I would understand why he had been cautious. Miss Warren unfolded a small square from her reticule. Mine said he would not embarrass me in front of my pupils. Hattie placed the 3 notes side by side. Each carried Celia's signature. She arranged the room, Mrs. Dace said, not merely the meeting. Yes, Josephine answered. She arranged the surprise. Why? Miss Warren asked. Josephine drew Ruth's authorized transcription from the portfolio. That is what we are trying to prove. Ruth placed her original on the table but kept one hand on the paper. Read the last paragraph. Josephine did not touch the sheet. She read from the transcription instead. The letter promised that after marriage Tobias would sell the southern strip of iron lark needed for the new stock pens, then purchase a townhouse so Ruth would not be isolated at the ranch. Mrs. Dace opened her own letter. Mine says he would grant the company its road once a wife persuaded him to stop living like a hermit. Miss Warren's page promised a new schoolhouse would follow the stock pens. The personal bait differed. Southcutt did not. Josephine closed the transcription. The letters were not only meant to make 6 women hope, they were meant to make the sale of Southcutt sound natural, expected, already promised. Ruth turned toward the door. "Bring him in." Josephine opened it. Tobias entered alone. He removed his hat and stood until Ruth indicated the empty chair at the far end of the table. He did not look at the letters first. He looked at the women holding them. Ruth spoke without preface. "Did you ever notice a blue ribbon at the spring sale?" Tobias's face tightened. "No." The answer landed hard. He did not soften it with invention. "Did you intend to sell Southcutt after marriage?" "No." "Would a wife have persuaded you?" "She would have had the right to argue with me. She would not have owned land she did not buy, and neither would Dwyer's company." Mrs. Dace leaned forward. "Then why did people believe you were choosing among women?" Tobias rested his hat against his knee. "Because I let them." No one moved. "I did not write the letters," he continued, "but I knew the town treated my being unmarried as a story. Invitations came easier. Merchants introduced me to families they wanted business from. Investors listened longer when they thought I might marry into town. I called it harmless because I never made a direct promise." Ruth's laugh held no humor. "You accepted the benefit and left the cost to women who were expected to wait." "Yes, that is not forgery." "No." Tobias kept his gaze on her. "It is still mine to answer for." Josephine felt the weight of the packet in her portfolio. His admission did not excuse her own delay. It made honesty more urgent. Miss Warren asked whether he believed Josephine. Tobias answered after a measured breath. "I believe the printing evidence she has shown. I believe Horace wants Southcutt. I also know she has not told me everything." Josephine met his eyes. "Neither have you." He accepted the blow without defense. Ruth returned her letter to its sleeve. "Then all of you have been using silence differently." "Yes," Josephine said. "The difference will be what each person does after it is named." She reviewed custody once more. Each woman retained her original. Any public quotation required permission. No one would hand her letter to Tobias, Horace, or Josephine merely because a man asked. Mrs. Dace signed permission for comparison, but not publication. Miss Warren allowed the Southcutt sentence to be quoted without her name. Ruth permitted her final paragraph to be read when she was present. When the meeting ended, the women left by the rear door to avoid Horace's office windows. Tobias remained near the porch rail. Josephine carried her portfolio beneath one arm, but her free hand trembled from the strain of holding the room together. Tobias noticed. He did not ask to touch her. Josephine extended her hand first. He glanced down, then back at her face. Only when her fingers curled around his did he close his own. His palm was warm and steady, but he did not pull her nearer. "Southcutt tomorrow," she said. "You'll hear the rest of Horace's offer there." "And you?" "You'll hear more of mine." The promise was incomplete. So was the trust. But for the first time, they were walking toward the same withheld truth, instead of using silence to stand apart. By sunrise on Thursday, October 11th, Josephine had locked the smudged proof, the first-line packet, and her mother's repaired composing stick inside Hattie Weller's sideboard. She carried only Ruth Talbot's authorized transcription and a notebook tied shut with black thread. Tobias arrived with 2 saddled horses and no questions about the locked evidence. That restraint mattered more after the promises they had made the night before. Southcutt lay beyond the main iron lark corrals, where the ranch narrowed into a long strip of buffalo grass between 2 shallow draws. The morning wind moved dry seed heads against their boots as Tobias led the horses down the slope. A line of survey stakes marked the route Dwyerland and Stock Company wanted for its proposed stock pens. "How much shorter?" Josephine asked. "Near 4 miles for cattle coming from the West Ranges. And how much of the route depends on this strip?" "All of it." Tobias stopped beside a red-topped stake. "The company controls options on land near the siding. Without Southcut, the cattle must circle north through rougher ground and cross a creek twice, which makes their advertised route false, unless I sign an easement. Josephine opened her notebook. Can the investors compel one? No. Can the town vote one into existence? Not without a lawful precinct, and none has begun. Would marriage transfer it? No. Iron Lark remains mine unless I deed land away. Then every letter that promised a wife could deliver Southcut was selling authority she would not possess. Tobias's mouth hardened. Yes. Who profits if the pen's open? Horace receives a promoter's fee. The company gains from stock subscriptions and higher lot values near the siding. Celia receives a commission when subscriptions close. And you, a closer market might lower hauling costs. Josephine waited, but not enough to explain your silence. He looked toward the stakes. No, she closed the notebook without writing. Then tell me what you were not ready to swear to. The wind pressed his coat against him. For several breaths, Tobias watched the grass instead of her. 3 weeks ago, Horace offered $800 for a permanent easement. Market value? Less than half. You refused. Yes. What followed? He said the confusion around my name could end if I signed before the investors arrived. Josephine felt anger sharpen into clarity. Not confusion. Silence. Yes. He offered to stop a scandal in exchange for land. Yes. And you concealed that from me. I did. Why? Because I thought telling you would make the letters look genuine. A man does not offer to end confusion unless he has some hold over it. That reasoning protected Horace. Tobias accepted the blow. I know. It also let you keep the part of the truth that made you look least foolish. Yes, Josephine turned toward the nearest stake. Red cloth fluttered from its top, bright against the pale range. You let the town tell itself a story about a lonely rancher for years. I did not write that story. You collected what it brought you. He drew a slow breath. Introductions. Credit. Invitations. Men who believed I might marry into town listened longer when I talked business. And women carried the cost. Yes. So the false Tobias in those letters did not come from nowhere. Tobias's face did not close. That was becoming one of the hardest things about him. He stood before blame instead of stepping aside. No, he said. It used what I allowed people to believe. Josephine opened Ruth's transcription. The wind tugged at the upper corner. The letters sold one false promise to 6 women and another to the town. Marriage, land, prosperity, all made to look inevitable. What do you believe about me? Tobias asked. The question was not defensive. That made it dangerous. Josephine looked at the man beside her. The one who had signed her terms stopped when she raised a hand, refused to read words not set for him, and still concealed an offer because shame had frightened him. Your actions are becoming real, she said. That is not the same as saying I trust all of you. No. A gust tore Ruth's transcription from her grasp. The paper lifted once, struck the red stake, and skated toward the draw. Josephine lunged. Tobias moved from the other side. Their hands caught opposite corners before the sheet crossed the edge. He held still until she secured her side. I have it, she said. He released first. The nearness remained. His face was close enough for her to see the pale scar beneath his lower lip and the dust caught at the edge of his collar. Neither moved back at once. Tobias's voice lowered. May I touch my forehead to yours? Josephine's pulse answered before she did. Yes. He leaned only partway. He left the final distance to her. Josephine closed it. His forehead rested against hers, warm beneath the cool wind. No kiss, no hand at her waist. The contact held the shape of a question. Neither had earned the right to answer yet. You are still withholding something, he said. Yes, the reason you stayed silent 4 days. Yes. Will you tell me before Horace does? I told you I would. That was a promise. It remains one. Tobias did not press. Josephine stepped back first and folded Ruth's transcription into her notebook. The warmth of his skin stayed with her after the wind returned. They walked the boundary on foot, checking stakes against Tobias's deed notes. Near the southern turn, Josephine saw a fresh set of narrow hoofprints cutting across the ranch trail. One hind shoe left a deeper crescent at the outside edge. Tobias crouched beside the track, Celia's mare. You were certain? The left hind shoe was reset last week. It lands crooked. The prints led toward a stake where a square of white cloth had been tied beneath the red survey flag. "Do your riders leave messages here?" Josephine asked. "Survey crews do. Eli checks the southern stakes every second morning." Then Celia did not need to know we would come today. She only needed to know the note would reach me. Tobias untied the cloth. Inside lay a folded scrap addressed in Celia's hand. "Ask Miss Avery who set the first line." Josephine felt the meaning before Tobias raised his eyes. The note revealed nothing he did not already know. It revealed that Celia knew where the secret could be sharpened. "She wants you to doubt the evidence because my hands touched its beginning," Josephine said. "Did they?" "Yes. Did you know the purpose?" "Not when I said it." "Did you know before the letters were mailed?" Josephine looked toward the line of stakes. September 29th, 4 days before the supper. 6 address slips beside the galley. Horace ordering the type broken and the proof burned. "I knew enough to be afraid," she said. "Not enough to prove the whole scheme." "That is not the same answer." "No." Tobias folded Celia's note along its existing crease and offered it to Josephine. "It concerns your secret." She did not take it. "It was addressed to you." He kept it. "Another small act of proper custody." "Horace will make the first line public," Tobias said. "Soon. Then I will speak before he can define what my silence meant." "To whom?" "The women first. Then anyone Horace gathers." Tobias studied her without trying to bargain for more. "What do you need from me?" "Do not defend me before I tell the truth, even if they accuse you. Especially then." The request cost him. She saw it. "Agreed," he said. They returned to the horses under a sky gone hard and bright. Southcutt remained Tobias's land. The note remained in his coat. The proof, packet, and composing stick remained locked at Hattie's. Nothing had moved except the boundary between attraction and trust. By the time they turned toward Morrow Flats, Josephine understood the next injury would not come from discovering that her hands had helped build the lie. It would come from choosing whether to reveal that truth while she still had a chance to name it herself. By Friday morning, Josephine no longer had the luxury of choosing whether the first line would become public. She could only choose whose voice named it first. Hattie unlocked the sideboard after breakfast and stood beside Josephine while she removed the smudged proof, the sealed type packet, and her mother's repaired composing stick. Ruth Talbot arrived with her original letter inside its stiff sleeve. Mrs. Dace and Miss Warren came together, each holding her own page. Tobias waited near the backroom window with Celia's note folded in his coat. Josephine placed the proof on the table, then set the packet beside it. "You may all leave before I open this," she said. "Once you see the line, Horace can claim you knew my part and helped conceal it." Ruth sat. "He already claims I chased a man who never wanted me. I would rather know what my judgment was used for." Mrs. Dace removed one glove. "Open it." Miss Warren nodded. Josephine broke the paper seam she had marked October 8th. The type line slid into her palm, dark with old ink. She locked it into the brass composing stick without disturbing the order, then laid the tool beside the proof. "My dear miss" matched the opening measure. The damaged M aligned with the smear below it. "Your hands made that," Ruth said. "Yes. Did they make our names?" "No. Did you know there would be 6 letters?" Josephine kept her eyes on the women, not Tobias. "I saw 6 address slips on September 29th. Horace said they belonged to invitations. He ordered me to break the type and burn the spoiled proof." "And you waited 4 days," Mrs. Dace said. "I did. Why? Because I had suspicion, not a finished letter, and because I was afraid one accusation from a woman employed by Horace would cost me my work before it protected anyone." Ruth's voice was low. "It did cost you your work. After the letters had already reached you. No answer could make that delay noble." Josephine did not try. "I should have found a way to warn Tobias. I should have asked whether any woman had received his name in print. I preserved evidence and mistook that for enough." Tobias had known the dates. He had not heard the reason stated without defense. His face gave nothing away. Josephine rewrapped the type line and returned the sealed packet to her portfolio. The composing stick remained beside her hand. Ruth replaced her original in its sleeve. "Tell the room exactly as you told us." "I will, before Horace, if he lets me." A bell struck outside. 3 hard blows from the public hall, then 3 more. Hattie crossed to the front window. "He has called a meeting." Tobias took his hat from the peg. You do not owe a crowd the part that belongs to these women. Horace will give them a version whether I attend or not. Josephine lifted the portfolio. This time I will not let silence arrive first. The others left by the front door together. Tobias remained. The question between them was no longer whether Josephine had touched the lie. It was whether affection could survive the full measure of her delay. She stepped close enough to see the pale scar below his lip. You have given me more room than I deserved. That is not mine to judge, no, but this is mine to choose. Josephine placed her palm against his cheek. Tobias did not lean into the touch. He waited, leaving her free to withdraw. Her pulse beat hard beneath her collar. Desire did not clear the record. It only made honesty more costly. She rose onto her toes. Tobias searched her face. "Are you certain about this?" she said. Yes, she kissed him. Briefly at first then, with enough warmth to make denial impossible. Tobias answered only what she offered. One hand lifted toward her waist and stopped before contact. When Josephine drew back, he lowered it. Neither called the kiss forgiveness or promise. Hattie appeared in the doorway. Horace has the print order stub. The public hall was crowded by the time they arrived. Horace stood beneath the harvest banner with Celia beside him, and a narrow slip held high. The 6 recipients occupied the front row. Merchants lined the walls. 2 school fathers stood behind Miss Warren. Nate Colby remained near the rear door, cap crushed between both hands. Horace struck the table. "One private courtship job," he read. "One initial setting. Compositor's mark J.A." He turned toward Josephine. "Are those your initials?" She walked forward before he could summon her. Tobias stopped where she left him, visible but not leading. Josephine placed the smudged proof on the table while keeping one hand on its edge. "They are." Celia's voice cut cleanly across the room. "Then tell these women who composed the words that deceived them." "I did." The crowd stirred. Ruth did not look away. Horace presented one body as a private letter for a rancher embarrassed by his handwriting. Josephine continued. "I set the opening and pulled this proof. On September 29th, I saw 6 address slips beside the galley. Horace said they belonged to another job. He ordered me to break the type and burn the proof." Horace spread his hands. "Yet she kept both." Celia stepped forward. "She kept them until Mr. Mercer had reason to pay attention to her." Heat moved through the room in a wave of whispers. Josephine did not look toward Tobias. "I kept them because the job no longer made sense," and said nothing while 6 letters traveled through town, Horace said. Josephine faced the recipients. "I did not know the copies had been printed or mailed. I knew enough to be suspicious. I waited for certainty when warning might have prevented harm. That failure is mine, Mrs." Dace's expression tightened, but she remained seated. Miss Warren looked down at her original. Ruth held hers against her chest. Horace lifted the stub again. "A dismissed printer now calls her own work evidence against her employer. My labor proves where the first body began. It does not prove who ordered 6 names, supplied private details, copied Tobias's signature, or charged the envelopes to your company account." Celia's chin lifted. "The account is used for business mail." Then explain why a courtship warning addressed to Tobias was charged to it on October 4th. That caught the merchants. Several turned toward Horace. He recovered quickly. "You have not shown this alleged warning to anyone here." Tobias spoke from the rear. "I have it." He did not produce the copy or offer it to the crowd. "It remains mine until I choose otherwise." Horace's eyes narrowed. "A convenient alliance. A written employment," Josephine said, "witnessed before the warning arrived." "No one touched the job after you began it," Horace said. Near the rear door, Nate's cap twisted sharply in his hands. His face went pale. Josephine saw the lie strike him. So did Celia. She turned and fixed him with a warning stare. Nate stepped backward. Horace noticed too late. "Stay where you are, boy." Nate fled through the door. A larger question left with him. Tobias's voice came from behind Josephine. "You asked me to trust your proof while you decided how much of yourself to reveal." She turned. Pain held his face rigid, but he did not reach for the proof or use the kiss as a claim. "Yes. You required honesty from me before you gave me the reason for your 4 days of silence. Yes. I believe you did not design the scheme. I do not yet know what your delay allowed." Josephine accepted the distinction. Then do not pretend certainty for my sake." Tobias lowered his head once. "I won't." Horace gathered the stub and smiled toward the room as though ambiguity belonged to him now. Josephine returned the proof and type packet to her portfolio and wrapped the composing stick inside her satchel. The women kept their originals. Tobias kept Celia's note and the warning copy. Nate carried the answer to who had reset the names, and Horace still owned the press that would reduce Josephine's confession to a headline by dawn. By sunrise on Saturday, October 13th, Horace Dwyer had taken Josephine's confession and cut away every word that made it honest. Printer admits Mercer letters where her work filled the upper half of his front page. Beneath it, Horace claimed she had created 6 romantic rivals, copied Tobias Mercer's name, and built the scandal to force herself into the notice of a rancher who had never wanted her. The article did not mention the Dwyer postage account, Celia's separate summonses, the warning copy addressed to Tobias, or Nate Colby fleeing when Horace denied anyone else had touched the job. By 8 o'clock, 2 merchants had canceled printing orders. Mrs. Dace arrived at Hattie Weller's boarding house before breakfast, her original letter folded beneath one arm. "My husband's family has begun asking whether I encouraged this," she said. "I cannot let you quote me in public." Josephine did not argue. "Keep the original dry, covered, and in your own possession. Your permission is yours to withdraw." Miss Warren came next. She kept her letter inside her reticule and remained standing. "2 fathers have threatened to remove their children from my school. Then your name comes out of every public comparison. Do you still believe Horace arranged the letters? I know his press produced the first setting. I know Celia gathered the recipients. I know the Dwyer Company account paid the postage. I know more remains unproved." Miss Warren's face tightened. "You sound less certain than before." "I am being more exact." The answer did not comfort her, but Josephine would not purchase loyalty with a certainty she did not possess. Miss Warren left carrying the original. Josephine placed the smudged proof and the rewrapped first-line packet inside Hattie's locked cash box, separated by clean paper. The key remained with Josephine. Her repaired composing stick stayed wrapped in her satchel. Near noon, a crowd gathered outside Dwyer's office, where Horace had pasted the headline in the window. Celia stood in the doorway receiving sympathy as though the scandal had injured her family. Tobias rode in from Iron Lark and dismounted without surrendering his horse to anyone. He had not sent Josephine a message. She watched from across the street as a cattle buyer called, "Mercer, did she write those letters to trap you?" Another man laughed. Maybe she thought 1 promise out of 6 would catch. Tobias stopped beneath the newspaper window, his shoulders locked. Josephine saw the decision before he spoke. He meant to cut her free from the accusation that she wanted marriage. He did not ask what the cut would remove with it. "Miss Avery has no personal claim on me," he said. The crowd quieted. "There is no attachment between us. She acts on her own." Horace stepped into the doorway. "Then you deny employing her?" "I did not say that. You said she acts alone. I said she has no personal claim." Horace turned toward the listeners. A useful distinction after a woman admits composing courtship letters in his name. Someone behind Josephine murmured, "He never wanted her either." The word struck where Horace intended, not because Tobias's desire measured her worth, because his denial transformed professional work into the pursuit of an unwilling man. Every proof she offered could now be called another attempt to win him. Tobias saw her across the street. Understanding reached him too late. Josephine walked away without hurrying. She would not let the crowd watch her flee. Tobias found her behind Hattie's house, where clean sheets snapped on the washing line. Josephine was folding dry linen because cloth obeyed the hands that handled it. He stopped outside the gate. "May I come in?" "You may stand there." He stayed beyond the latch. "I was trying to keep them from fastening your name to mine." Josephine aligned the corners of a sheet. "You protected my respectability by destroying my credibility. That was not what I intended. Intent does not restore what your words removed. I told them you had no claim on me. Yes, Horace will print that beneath my confession. The woman who set the first line. The woman the rancher publicly rejected. What conclusion do you think he will sell?" Tobias gripped the gatepost but did not enter. "I would rather they hate me than shame you. You had no right to choose which shame I must bear." He absorbed the words without protest. Josephine took another sheet from the line. "You erased the fact that you hired me. You erased your belief in my skill. You erased the written terms we made, because you feared the town might discover an attachment it did not know existed." His face tightened. "I did not mean to erase you." "You did." Wind tore one corner of the sheet loose. Josephine caught it before it touched the ground. Tobias did not rush forward. At least he had learned that care could remain at the gate. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. "Correct the public record. Tell me how. State that you hired me. State what you believe about the first galley. State that Horace offered silence in exchange for Southcut. State that your denial damaged the woman you asked to find the truth." "I do not know every part of the truth yet." "Then say only what you know." Josephine placed the folded sheet in the basket. "Until you do, our professional alliance is suspended. You are ending the investigation." "No, I am ending your right to stand beside it while denying that you chose to employ me." Tobias lowered his head once. "I will return within 2 days with a statement." "Not an explanation, a statement." He stepped away from the gate. No request for forgiveness, no reach toward her. Sunday afternoon, Josephine saw Nate Colby leave the rear of Dwyer's press office with the torn pay tally clenched in one hand. Horace followed him into the alley. "You reset what Avery began," Horace said. "If anyone asks questions, you will answer beside her." Nate's face went pale. "You said it was another private run. I told you to work. You still owe me for the night hours." Horace snatched at the tally. Nate pulled it back and fled toward the livery. Josephine did not call after him. A frightened witness chased in public would only run farther. She returned to Hattie's and described what she had heard. "His aunt rents the little house behind the livery," Hattie said. "He has slept there since his mother died. Can you learn whether he means to leave town?" "Without telling him, you asked." "Tell him," I asked. "Do not tell him what to say." Before Hattie could go, Celia entered the dining room carrying a sealed envelope. She placed it on the table. "There are $200 inside." Josephine remained standing. "For what?" "A train east. A room where no one knows your name. Enough to begin again." "Your father believes $200 can buy silence. My father believes you are damaging people who have done nothing to you." "Which people?" "The investors. The merchants, my family. Tobias, if he continues refusing what progress requires. Southcut." Celia's eyes narrowed. "One strip of land should not hold back an entire town. It belongs to him. Ownership is not the same as responsibility, nor is ambition." Celia pushed the envelope nearer. "Leave before the investor meeting. The rest can be corrected." Josephine drew a clean sheet from the sideboard and wrote the date, time, Celia's name, Hattie's name, and the amount offered. "What are you doing?" "Recording your proposal." "You cannot prove the envelope contains money unless you open it." "Then open it yourself while Hattie watches." Celia broke the seal and displayed the bills. Hattie counted them aloud. $200. Josephine did not touch them. Beneath the money lay an unsigned note. "Leave Kansas before the investor meeting, and no further harm will come to your name." "Take the money," Josephine said. "The note remains." Celia gathered the bills but left the paper. "Tobias has already told the town there is nothing between you." Josephine folded the note and placed it in her portfolio, separate from the core evidence. "What lies between us is not yours to arrange." After Celia left, Josephine wrote one sentence on a fresh page and placed it beside the signed employment memorandum. "I believe Josephine Avery, and I asked her to find the truth." Tobias could sign beneath it or leave the line empty. Nate Colby, meanwhile, held the first evidence that Horace intended to make 2 workers carry the blame for one man's design. Tobias returned before breakfast on Monday, with Josephine's sentence folded inside his coat, and 3 pages of explanation written in his own hand. She read the first page at Hattie Weller's dining table, crossed out half of it, and slid the sheets back across the wood. No. Tobias remained standing opposite her. Eli Ransom waited near the front door with his hat beneath one arm. Hattie poured coffee no one touched. "You have not read the rest," Tobias said. "The first page tells me what the rest will do." Josephine tapped a paragraph blackened by her pencil. You explained that the crowd gave you no time to think. You explained that concern for my reputation guided your words. You explained that public custom placed you in an impossible position. All of that is true. It also shelters you from the harm. His gaze moved over the crossed-out lines. What remains? Josephine turned the first sheet toward him. What you did, what you knew, what it cost. The revised statement was shorter. I hired Josephine Avery to determine who produced the letters attributed to me. I believe her account that Horace Dwyer presented the first setting as one private courtship job. Horace Dwyer later offered to end the public confusion if I granted an easement across Southcutt. I refused the easement but concealed the offer. When I denied any connection to Miss Avery, I damaged the credibility of the woman I had asked to find the truth. That denial was mine. Tobias read it once. You removed everything about us. There is no us for the town to define. The memory of her kiss stood between them, but Josephine did not soften the boundary. You will not repair a public denial by making a public claim. I was not trying to claim you. Then do not write about protection, affection, courtship, or private regret. State the professional truth. Leave my personal choices to me. Tobias drew out Hattie's pen. And your role in the first galley? I will state it myself? After you. He signed without restoring a single excuse. Eli witnessed it. Hattie added her name beneath his. Josephine sanded the ink and folded the original. Copies go to Iron Lark's gate, the livery, the general store, and the post office. Not Dwyer's window, Eli asked. Horace would tear it down and claim it never existed. Tobias placed the original inside his coat. What else? Josephine handed Hattie a second note addressed to the postmaster. Please deliver this before noon. I am asking only whether the Dwyer Company postage account contains entries for the 2 mailings. No names, no private details. If the records exist, ask him to confirm that at the auction. Hattie tucked the note into her apron pocket. And if he refuses, then we know the account cannot yet bear public weight. By noon, 4 copies of Tobias's statement had been posted where Horace could not remove them without witnesses. Eli nailed one to the Iron Lark gate before riding into town. Hattie watched another go up beside the general store's price board. The postmaster placed his copy behind the counter near the outgoing mail schedule, then sent word that he would attend the auction and confirm only what his account book lawfully showed. The cattle ring behind the livery was crowded when Tobias arrived with the signed original. Buyers, ranch hands, merchants, and families pressed against the rails. Horace stood near the auction clerk with Celia beside him. Copies of the Morrow Flats Weekly protruded from a crate at their feet. Tobias handed the auctioneer a $5 note. 2 minutes. The auctioneer accepted it and stepped aside. A few men laughed until Tobias unfolded the statement. He waited until they stopped. Then he read every word Josephine had left. He did not add that he had meant well. He did not blame the crowd. When he reached the line about Southcutt, Horace pushed forward. That was a private negotiation. Tobias lowered the page. You made the confusion public. Offering peace does not prove a man began the quarrel. Then explain why peace required my land. The crowd turned toward Horace. Tobias finished the statement. His voice remained plain when he reached the final sentence. That denial was mine. He stepped down without waiting for approval. Josephine climbed the platform alone. The smudged proof and first-line packet remained locked in Hattie's cash box. Her composing stick stayed wrapped in her satchel. She carried no object a crowd could seize, only a written account and the facts she was prepared to own. I set the first body of the letter, she said. Horace Dwyer presented it as one private courtship job. I believed him. When I found 6 address slips, I preserved the spoiled proof and the first line of type. I did not tell Mr. Mercer at once that my initials marked the work. I feared my labor would be mistaken for my purpose. Horace called from below, because it was your purpose. Josephine did not turn toward him. The 6 women were summoned separately to the supper by Celia Dwyer. The warning copy addressed to Tobias Mercer was charged to the Dwyer Company postage account after that confrontation. I have not claimed when it was printed because I do not yet possess proof of that hour. Precision settled the ring more effectively than outrage. I was wrong to hide my part in the first setting. That wrong does not make every later act mine. Ruth Talbot appeared at the edge of the crowd, with her original letter inside its stiff sleeve. Mine promises that South Cut will be sold after marriage, she said. She came to the platform but did not surrender the page. I believed this letter. I do not believe it now, Mrs. Dace stepped from behind a wagon with her original beneath one arm. Miss Warren joined her. Neither woman looked comfortable. Both remained. Miss Avery told us to keep these, Mrs. Dace said. She never asked to own them. Miss Warren added. Celia Dwyer told each of us separately to bring our letters to the supper. Celia's face hardened. I tried to spare you further confusion. Ruth faced her. You arranged it. Horace lifted both hands. 3 embarrassed women repeating a dismissed print theory prove nothing. Not nothing, said the postmaster. He stood near the rear rail with his account book under one arm. My office holds 2 entries charged to the Dwyer Company account. One dated September 29th for 6 matching envelopes presented together. Another dated October 4th for 1 matching envelope addressed to Tobias Mercer at Iron Lark Ranch. Josephine asked, will you read who presented them at the investor meeting? Only with the consent of those whose correspondence is affected, or under proper authority. Tobias stepped forward. The warning copy is mine, I consent, Ruth answered next. So do I. Mrs. Dace nodded. Miss Warren hesitated, then said, I consent. 3 recipients are absent, the postmaster said. Their choice remains theirs. Will you bring the entries if all 6 consent before the meeting? Josephine asked. Yes, and if Horace refuses to let them speak, then I will preserve the record for a written complaint. Partial answer. The larger question remained behind the account book's cover, whose name stood beside both batches. Horace spread his hands toward the buyers. This is an auction, not a trial. Agreed, Josephine said. No verdict has been requested. Only the right to compare words before men invest money in the land those words were designed to reach. The auctioneer shifted impatiently. Horace's mouth flattened. My investors have no interest in romantic gossip. Then they should not object to hearing why Southcut appears inside a marriage promise. Tobias remained beside the rail, where Josephine had told him to stand, visible, believing her, not directing. She stepped down from the platform without taking his hand. Only after the crowd began to break apart did she turn toward him. You signed without changing my words. They were not mine to change. You read them without defending yourself. There was nothing left to defend. The answer did not erase the pain of his denial. It showed that he understood its shape. Josephine reached for his hand in full view of the auction ring. Tobias glanced down, but did not close his fingers until hers curled around his warm, deliberate, public, not forgiveness completed, permission to stand beside her again. Across the yard, Horace spoke sharply to the auction clerk, then left with Celia close behind. By dusk, every clean sheet of newsprint for sale in Morrow Flats had been purchased in Horace Dwyer's name. Horace had bought every clean sheet in Morrow Flats, but he had not bought the truth Nate Colby carried in his pocket. On Tuesday morning, October 16th, Hattie Weller led Josephine and Ruth Talbot to the small frame house behind the livery where Nate's aunt rented 2 rooms. Tobias did not come. A rancher standing in the doorway would have made every answer look purchased before Nate spoke it. The apprentice sat at a scarred kitchen table with his cap beside one elbow and the torn pay tally beneath his palm. I have nothing to say, he told them. Josephine remained standing until his aunt offered chairs. Then we will not put words in your mouth. Dwyer says you started the job. I set one body after he called it a private letter. He says that makes the rest yours. What does your own memory say? Nate's fingers closed over the tally. Ruth placed her stiff paper sleeve on the table but did not remove her original. He made 6 women carry his lie, she said. Now he means to make 2 workers carry it. Nate glanced toward the window. If I speak, no printer in Ford County will hire me. I cannot promise you work, Josephine said. I cannot promise what the county attorney will do, or whether Horace will be punished. I can promise that your statement will contain only what you saw, that Ruth will witness it, and that you will keep your own paper. Would Mercer protect me? If Horace threatened you in front of him, Tobias would stand between you. He would not decide what you must say. Nate studied her as though the distinction were unfamiliar. His aunt stood at the stove with one hand pressed flat against the iron door. She did not urge him toward courage. She only remained where he could see that telling the truth would not leave him entirely alone. Horace already plans to blame me. I heard him tell you so. Then why didn't you chase me? Because a frightened witness pursued in public will run farther. That broke the first edge of his resistance. Nate unfolded the tally. Pencil marks filled the narrow page. Dates, hours, jobs, amounts unpaid. Beside September 29th stood Mercer job night. Beside October 3rd stood Mercer copy after supper. This stays mine, he said. Yes. Josephine drew out a clean sheet. Tell us what the marks mean. Nate spoke in pieces. After Josephine left on September 29th, Horace ordered him to unlock the galley she had set. He changed the recipient line 6 times. Celia brought slips naming a blue ribbon, a widow's household, a schoolroom, family money, and other details gathered from subscriptions and common talk. Horace opened the locked job drawer and removed the clean shop copy of the Iron Lark cattle circular. From a small box he took a facsimile stamp cut to match Tobias's printed signature. Nate pressed it beneath each body. Did you make the stamp? Josephine asked. No, it was already there. Did you see who made it? No, she wrote only what he knew. On October 3rd, after the supper and after you were dismissed, Horace ordered one more copy. He chose Clara Fenwick's name. He said Mercer needed to understand another woman could be named before breakfast. Celia addressed the envelope to Iron Lark. She took it to the post office the next morning and charged it to the company account. Ruth's hand tightened on her sleeve. Was Clara meant to receive a letter? Not that I heard. Then we call it a warning copy, Josephine said. Not Clara's letter. Nate watched her cross out a sentence that guessed Horace's motive. You won't make the tally prove everything. It proves the hours and job names you recorded. Your account, the postal entry, and Tobias's copy support the rest. She read the statement back, sentence by sentence, while Nate followed each word with one ink-stained finger. Ruth witnessed it. Nate crossed out a line that said Horace had planned the entire stock pen scheme before September. He had never heard that. Josephine accepted the correction. He signed only after the page contained no claim beyond his sight and hearing, then kept both the statement and tally. The investors meet Thursday at dawn, Josephine said. Will you speak there? If the 6 women come, they decide for themselves. And Mercer? He will stand publicly, but he will not bring you in or answer for you. Nate looked at the unpaid hours again. I will come on my own. By late afternoon, all 6 recipients had agreed to meet at Hattie's, and each authorized the postmaster to read the September 29th account entry before the investors. Each woman brought her original and kept it in her own hands. Josephine unlocked Hattie's cash box, removed the smudged proof and the sealed first-line packet, then placed both in her portfolio. Her repaired composing stick came from her satchel. 2 women refused permission for their names to appear on the broadside. One allowed only her letter's date. Josephine honored every limit. Hattie found brown wrapping sheets at the grocer, pale blue stock from the milliner, and an old handbill press stored behind the mercantile. The women pooled coins for the rental. Tobias paid the posted rate only for the Iron Lark statement. He offered nothing else. What work do you need from me? He asked. Josephine set the composing stick on the stone. Turn the flywheel when I call. Stack sheets where Ruth directs. Do not increase the pace because you think faster is better. Understood. The broadside took shape in fragments rather than accusation, matching phrases, mailing dates, the broken capital M, the reverse star, the Southcut promise, and the fact that 6 women had been summoned separately. Because Dwyer's damaged type remained in his shop, Josephine cut a small reproduction of the bitten M into soft wood and set an ordinary star backward beside it. Beneath both she printed facsimiles from examined originals. No reader could mistake demonstration for recovered type. Ruth checked every date. Mrs. Dace checked quotations. Miss Warren corrected a schoolhouse reference. The women chose how much of themselves entered the page. One supplied only a date. Another allowed a Southcut sentence, but refused the personal promise surrounding it. The 6th stood beside the press, and asked that no private detail be quoted at all. Her presence was testimony enough. Tobias worked the flywheel under Josephine's count. Ink darkened his thumb and one cuff. When the press balked, he did not seize the rhythm. He waited until she told him to ease the plate and back and begin again. Sheets accumulated on chairs, crates, and a rope line, Hattie, stretched across the room. Clean newsprint would have looked orderly. The mismatched paper looked impossible to silence. Near midnight, Celia entered through the mercantile passage. "The investors meet at dawn Thursday," she said. "You have 1 day to reconsider." Ruth lifted her original. "Our names were already used. This time we choose the words beside them." Celia's gaze found Tobias. "You would let her ruin the town for one strip of grass." "Southcutt is not yours," he said. "Neither is she." Celia turned to Josephine. "No shop will employ Nate after he admits corrupting another man's press." Then Horace should not have taught him obedience was innocence. Celia's gaze moved to the drying sheets, then to Josephine's closed portfolio. She did not touch either. Too many witnesses now knew where the evidence rested. Celia left with her threat unanswered. Josephine set the final line herself. "No woman am here asked to be deceived." When the last sheet came free, Tobias stopped the wheel. "I owe you an apology that is not meant for an audience," he said. "I thought distance would protect you. It protected me from admitting what your courage required of mine. Do not promise never to fail again." "I won't." "Promise to hear me before choosing the remedy." "I promise." Josephine crossed the ink-stained floor and stepped into his arms. Tobias waited until her cheek rested against his chest before closing his hands across her back. No kiss, no demand that the embrace settle everything. Only warmth freely entered and freely held. At dawn on Wednesday, October 17th, the women posted the broadside beneath Dwyer's investor notice, outside the general store, beside the livery, and at the rail siding. Nate did not appear. Just before noon, his aunt brought Josephine a folded scrap. "I will come at dawn. Do not let Dwyer speak for me." At dawn on Thursday, October 18th, Nate Colby had not yet come. Frost silvered the freight room roof beside the Morrow Flats siding, and the first eastbound engine left smoke across the pale Kansas sky. Inside, Horace Dwyer had arranged a painted model of the proposed stock pens on a plank table. Tiny fences and cattle lanes surrounded a strip marked Southcutt, as though naming Tobias Mercer's land on wood had made it available. Investors filled the front benches. Merchants stood along the walls. The 6 women who had received the forged letters occupied one row, each holding her original. Tobias stood near the side door with Eli Ransom. Ruth Talbot watched the entrance. Josephine kept the smudged proof and sealed first-line packet inside her portfolio. Her mother's composing stick rested in her satchel. "He said dawn," Ruth murmured. "Dawn is not 1 minute," Josephine said. Horace struck the table with a pointer. "We have delayed long enough for gossip. This meeting concerns commerce." "Commerce requires a route," Tobias said. "Your model crosses my deeded land." Horace smiled toward the investors. "Mr. Mercer confuses one strip of grass with the prosperity of an entire town. The town does not own Southcutt. It may decide how much one man's refusal should cost him." Several ranchers shifted. Horace lifted a printed sheet. "Before we discuss access, we must clear away the slander surrounding my press." The page resembled one forged letter, but the paper was too white, and the margins too broad. "That is a facsimile," Josephine said. "Call it what it is. It reproduces the words. 6 originals are present. Each remains with the woman who received it." Ruth stood first. "Mine promises Mr. Mercer would sell Southcutt after marrying me." She read the passage from her place. Mrs. Dace followed with a paragraph about widowhood and a house in town. Miss Warren read the sentence naming her schoolroom. The remaining women chose their own limits. One withheld her name. Another read only the date and land promise. The last asked Ruth to speak while she kept the original visible in both hands. Their voices differed. The central promise did not. Horace pointed at Josephine. "Because she wrote one letter and copied it 6 times. Josephine placed the smudged proof on a clean board Hattie had brought, keeping 2 fingers on its edge. "My initials prove I set the first body, after Horace told me it was one private courtship letter. The damaged capital M and reverse star connect that setting to Dwyer's press. They do not prove who ordered 6 names, supplied private details, copied Tobias's signature, or mailed the envelopes. She set the packet beside the proof. This contains the original first line. Ruth and Hattie moved close as witnesses. Josephine broke the temporary seal, opened the paper, and locked the type line into her mother's composing stick. "My dear miss," matched the proof's measure. The damaged M aligned with the smear below it. "This proves my labor," Josephine said. "No more." She rewrapped the type and returned the packet to her portfolio. "A printer explaining how little her own work proves," Celia said. "A worker explaining the difference between the hand and the order." Josephine turned to the postmaster. "You have the consent." One by one, the 6 recipients agreed that the September 29th entry could be read. Tobias consented to disclosure of the October 4th entry concerning the warning copy. The postmaster opened his account book. September 29th. 6 envelopes of matching size and stock, charged to the Dwyer Printing and Land Company postage account, presented by Celia Dwyer. A murmur passed through the room. October 4th. 1 envelope of matching stock addressed to Tobias Mercer at Iron Lark Ranch, charged to the same account, presented by Celia Dwyer. Horace lowered the pointer. "My daughter handles business correspondence." "Courtship letters are company business?" Ruth asked. Celia stepped forward. The women wanted clarity. "I gathered materials so misunderstandings could be settled." Mrs. Dace's mouth tightened. "You gathered us into one room without telling any of us about the others. I prevented a longer humiliation. You arranged one." Horace faced the investors. Even if Celia presented the envelopes, Josephine Avery composed them. The freight room door opened. Nate Colby entered alone. His cap was in one hand. The torn pay tally protruded from his coat pocket, and his signed statement remained folded beneath it. Horace's face changed before he mastered it. "You have no place here?" Nate stopped beside Josephine, not behind her. "You told me I would answer beside her if questions came." "You are an apprentice who disobeyed his employer." "Then let him describe only what he saw," Josephine said. Horace moved toward Nate. Tobias stepped between them. He did not touch or threaten Horace. He only made further advance impossible. Josephine asked, "On September 29th, what were you ordered to do?" Nate's voice shook at first, then steadied. "Mr. Dwyer told me to unlock the galley Miss Avery had set. I changed the recipient line 6 times. Miss Dwyer brought slips with personal details. Mr. Dwyer took the clean Iron Lark Shop copy from his locked job drawer and used a facsimile stamp cut to match Mr. Mercer's printed signature." Horace laughed, a boy inventing instructions to excuse theft. Nate removed the tally. "I wrote the hours because you did not pay them." He kept hold while the nearest investors examined the dates. September 29th, Mercer job night. October 3rd, Mercer copy after supper. Josephine asked, "What happened on October 3rd?" After Miss Avery was dismissed, Mr. Dwyer ordered 1 more copy. He chose Clara Fenwick's name. He said Mr. Mercer needed to understand another woman could be named before breakfast. Miss Dwyer addressed it to Iron Lark and charged the postage the next morning. Tobias drew the warning copy from inside his coat and opened it without passing it away. The postmark read October 4th, the body addressed Clara Fenwick, the date inside read October 6th. "This is the copy," he said. Celia's composure cracked. Nate printed it, by his own admission. "Under your father's order," Nate replied, "using the details you carried." Horace turned on Josephine. "You expect investors to trust a dismissed woman and an unpaid apprentice?" "No single item asks for blind trust," Josephine said. "The tally supports Nate's dates. The account supports Celia's mailings. Tobias holds the warning copy. 6 women hold matching originals. The proof and type line connect the first setting to Dwyer's press. Nate explains the later runs and facsimile stamp. Ruth lifted her letter, and mine explains the purpose." She read the Southcut passage again. Josephine placed a Dwyer land and stock prospectus beside the model. The company lists Horace Dwyer as principal promoter and Celia Dwyer as subscription secretary, paid by commission when subscriptions close. The proposed route assumes access across Southcut. Tobias walked to the front table. "Horace offered to end the public confusion if I signed the easement. I concealed that offer because I feared it would make the letters appear genuine. He faced the women, then Josephine. I also benefited from being treated as a desirable bachelor. Then I denied any attachment to Miss Avery in public, believing distance would protect her. It damaged the credibility of the woman I hired to uncover the truth. Horace said, "A rancher's guilt does not prove fraud." "No," Tobias answered, "the evidence does. My guilt proves I made it easier." He placed one hand beside the painted south cut. "There will be no easement. The first investor to rise was a rancher from west of town. Then the route in this model does not exist." He collected his subscription paper. A merchant followed. Neither does the confidence behind it. He withdrew his pledge. Two others asked that their subscriptions be held until the complaints were reviewed. The general store owner told Horace no further advertisements would run until an independent account appeared. No applause followed. The project simply lost enough money to stop pretending it was inevitable. The postmaster closed his book. Written statements and receipts may be presented to the county attorney. These records remain in my office unless properly requested. Nate folded his tally. "Mine stays with me until I receive a receipt." "As it should," Josephine said. The women kept their originals. Tobias kept the warning copy. Josephine returned the proof and sealed packet to her portfolio. Horace had not been convicted. Celia had not confessed, but neither could print away the chain now standing before witnesses. Outside, cold sunlight reached the freight yard. Tobias followed Josephine only after the women had gone ahead. "May I kiss you?" he asked. Josephine turned. The man who once chose distance for her now waited for an answer he could not control. "Stand still." She caught the front of his coat and pulled him down. His mouth met hers with the hunger restraint had been holding since Hattie's back room. His hands settled on her upper arms, not drawing her closer until she leaned into him. The kiss deepened without becoming a claim. When Josephine stepped back, Tobias released her at once. "The town believing me does not decide my future," she said. "No." His breath remained uneven. "You do." Josephine looked across the street at Horace Dwyer's press office. "Then I want a press he cannot close." 6 weeks after the freight room meeting, the press Josephine had asked for came down the rail siding on a wagon whose rear wheel complained louder than the driver. Frost silvered Morrow Flats on Thursday, November 29, 1888, and the iron machine arrived wrapped in sacking, rope, and other men's doubts. The driver read the new sign above the empty storefront twice. "The Morrow Flats Clarion." "This is the place?" he asked. "It is," Josephine said. Hattie Weller stood in the doorway with a lease folded beneath her arm. She owned the boarding house and this vacant shop 2 doors away, along with the narrow room above it. Josephine had signed for both at the same rate Hattie would have charged any tenant. No favor hidden inside gratitude. No roof that could later become a claim. Inside, the floor had been braced with paid lumber, typecases weighted against the wall, and a ledger lay open on the front counter. The press had been purchased with subscriptions, job printing deposits, and the wages Josephine had saved from the investigation. Hattie would keep accounts and subscriptions for a weekly wage. Ruth Talbot would write a local column and be paid by the piece. Their labor would not disappear beneath the word friendship. The driver cut the ropes. Tobias Mercer and Eli Ransom waited for Josephine's direction before touching the frame. "Rear corner to Tobias," she said. "Eli at the forward side. Axle bar to the driver. Lift when I count." The press came off the wagon inch by inch and entered the shop without crushing a threshold or a finger. Tobias did not tell her. It would sit better nearer the east window. He waited until she pointed to the reinforced place 2 feet from the west wall. Only then did the men lower it. Josephine fitted a blank sheet against the tympan and pulled the lever once. The platen closed with a heavy serviceable knock. When it opened, the pressure mark lay square. The machine was older than Horace Dwyer's main press and would require repairs before spring. One roller showed a shallow split. The ink disc dragged at the edge. Josephine entered both faults in the repair ledger, instead of pretending ownership had made the machine perfect. Above the shop, her narrow room held a bedstead, washstand, trunk, and a window. She had moved from Hattie's attic earlier. The room was not grand. It was independent. The machine below was still hers to command. Hattie wrote the final freight charge into the ledger. Ruth pinned the first correction notice above the composing table. The 6 women retained their original letters. The Morrow Flats postmaster still held his account book. Nate Colby had surrendered his pay tally and signed statement only after the county attorney's clerk gave him a receipt, and he kept a copy of both. Josephine's smudged proof and sealed first line. Packet rested in a locked drawer beneath the Clarion counter, along with labeled facsimiles, examination notes, the employment memorandum, and Celia's leave town note. No object had changed owners merely because the scandal had become public. The legal review moved more slowly than rumor. The county attorney had requested written responses from Horace and Celia. Celia signed a limited statement admitting that she gathered personal details, presented both batches of mail under the Dwyer Company account, and expected a commission if subscriptions closed. She claimed Horace designed the scheme and told her no law had been broken. Then she left Morrow Flats. Horace's newspaper appeared, but not reliably. Merchants had removed enough advertisements that one issue came out on a single sheet and another did not appear at all. No one had been arrested. No verdict had been promised. The Stockpen project had stalled because its advertised route crossed land it did not own. Southcutt remained part of Iron Lark. Truth had not produced a dramatic ending. It had produced consequences that could be entered in a ledger. Horace still crossed the street without shame. Some townspeople still treated Josephine's confession as equal to his design. Mrs. Dace remained unwilling to let her name appear. Miss Warren allowed only the corrected account agreed upon. The women had not become a cheerful sisterhood because the same man deceived them. They had become 6 people whose separate choices were finally being respected. By noon, the press stood level. Josephine washed grease from her hands and returned to the first galley. The opening issue would carry the women's correction above the fold, Tobias's public statement, school notices, freight arrivals, cattle prices, 2 births, 1 death, and a notice that complaints involving Dwyer's Press remained under review. Ruth brought the correction line to the counter. Before the cattle market, before everything, Josephine said, that will push 1 advertisement to page 3. Then it moves. The doorbell sounded. Tobias entered carrying 2 folded sheets and a bank draft. Mud darkened the edge of 1 boot. He had come every Wednesday during the 6 weeks since the freight room meeting. Though calving trouble, a damaged windmill, and 1 flooded creek had changed the hour. Some weeks he brought paid printing. Once he brought lunch and left it unopened when Josephine said she had no time. Another week he arrived during a subscription dispute, heard her tell him she could not speak, and returned to Iron Lark without offense. Consistency had done what declarations could not. He set the first sheet on the counter. Iron Lark cattle advertisement. Winter sale postponed until February. Josephine checked the wording, marked an unclear weight, and named the posted rate. Tobias counted out the amount without bargaining. Then he placed the bank draft beside it. The figure would have paid for fresh type, 2 rollers, and nearly a year of rent. "What is that?" she asked. "An investment in the Clarion." "What return?" "None required." "Then it is not an investment." "A loan." "What security?" "None." Josephine slid it back. "Then it is influence dressed as generosity." Tobias did not argue. "I would never ask to approve a line. The money would ask every morning, even if you did not." He studied the draft, folded it, and returned it to his coat. "Then no, the advertisement remains at the posted rate, then it prints." Hattie carried the account ledger to the rear table. Ruth followed with the galley, granting privacy without pretending not to understand. Tobias remained across the counter. "Is the business finished between us?" he asked.
May I speak personally?
Josephine removed her inked apron and hung it on the peg. "You may." He came no closer. "I love you." The words arrived without an offer of a ranch, a roof, or rescue. "I love that you tell the truth precisely even when a larger claim would make people cheer. I love that you refused admiration when what you required was accountability. I love that your courage does not depend on being unafraid." Josephine had expected him to speak of strength. She had not expected him to understand its discipline. "Do you want an answer?" she asked. "Or forgiveness for saying it? An answer, freely given, I love you too. Relief moved through him, but he did not cross the counter. Josephine continued. That does not move me to Iron Lark, I know. It does not give you a voice in the Clarion. I know. My accounts remain mine. My room above this shop remains mine. A visit can be refused when I am working. Courtship creates no right to approve what I print. Agreed. You answer quickly. I have had 6 weeks to learn the terms. My terms may change. Then, ask me again when they do. Josephine stepped around the counter. Are you asking to court me openly? Yes. Then I accept. She caught the front of his coat and kissed him, not with the urgency of the freight yard. This kiss lasted, deepened, and settled into the knowledge that neither had to win the other before the door closed. Tobias kept his hands at her upper arms until Josephine leaned nearer. May I put my hand at your waist? He asked. Yes. His palm settled there, warm through wool and no farther. Josephine chose the distance that remained. When they parted, Hattie was studying one subscription column with heroic concentration, and Ruth had carried the same notice to the rear table twice. Josephine returned to the press. Her mother's repaired composing stick lay beside the first issue. The women's correction had been set. Tobias's accountability had been set. The Clarion's name waited in type. One narrow line inside the brass stick remained empty. Some words were true before they were ready to be printed. The empty line in Josephine Avery's brass composing stick waited through the winter because she refused to fill it before the words were true. On Wednesday, April 3, 1889, spring wind lifted last year's dust along the road outside the Morrow Flats Clarion and carried the smell of thawing earth through the open transom. 6 months had passed since 6 women stood beneath harvest lamps, holding promises Tobias Mercer had never written. The Clarion had survived, not handsomely. Honestly, Josephine had replaced a cracked roller in January, purchased 2 incomplete cases of second-hand type in February, and paid the freight balance without borrowing from Iron Lark. Subscriptions, job notices, merchant circulars, and school board printing covered the rent on Hattie Weller's storefront and the narrow room above it. Hattie received regular wages for keeping accounts and managing subscriptions. Ruth Talbot's local column appeared every week in the lower left corner, where she reported freight arrivals, school, exhibitions, church suppers, cattle prices, and corrections, without offering a single word of romantic advice. The Dwyer Land and Stock Project had collapsed for lack of a lawful route and reliable investors. South Cut remained part of Iron Lark. Horace had sold his failing newspaper in February and withdrawn from public business while the county attorney continued reviewing statements, postal account entries, Nate Colby's tally, and the receipts preserving each transfer. No verdict had arrived. Josephine printed no prediction of one. The 6 original forged letters remained with the women who had received them. Inside the Clarion's locked evidence drawer lay the smudged first proof, the sealed first-line type packet, labeled facsimiles, examination notes, Celia's leave town message, and signed receipts recording every inspection. Nate's tally remained in the county file under receipt. Truth had not grown stronger by gathering every object into Josephine's hands. It had grown stronger because each owner retained the right to decide what happened to what belonged to her. At 11, Tobias tied his gelding outside and entered carrying 2 cattle notices, a paper sack of lunch, and mud along one boot. Wednesday. He had come every Wednesday since the Clarion's first issue, though calving trouble, a broken windmill, and one flooded creek had altered the hour. Iron Lark remained sound but never effortless. Winter feed had cost more than expected. 2 cattle had been lost during a creek crossing. Eli Ransom still objected to every printing charge over 50 cents, then paid it on time. Tobias set the notices on the counter, weights from Monday's sale. Eli checked them twice and accused the scale of favoring cattle. Josephine took the pages. Did he submit evidence? A speech, long enough to require a second issue. The Clarion charges extra for speeches. He expected nothing less. Tobias placed the lunch sack near the type cabinet, but did not open it. Courtship had made him welcome. It had not given him authority over her working hours. He waited while Josephine checked the weights, marked 2 unclear figures, and finished locking a school board correction into the chase. Only after she removed her apron did he unpack bread, cold beef, pickled beans, and 2 small apples. They ate at the work table beneath drying sheets. No crowd watched. No woman's dignity depended on Tobias's next sentence. The ordinary piece of the meal carried more weight than the fascination Morrow Flats had once attached to his unmarried name. Tobias wiped his hands, then drew a folded page from inside his coat. "Business or personal?" Josephine asked. "Personal, though you may correct the spelling. That warning suggests danger. I have survived your pencil before." She opened the page. His handwriting remained plain and forward-leaning, without the false flourish Horace had copied. The notice read, "Josephine Avery and Tobias Mercer intend to marry in September." No claim that Iron Lark had won her. No promise that she would abandon the Clarion. No language turning her into a reward at the end of his public disgrace. Still, one word troubled her. "Intend," she said. Tobias watched her face. "Too uncertain? Too bloodless. I considered promised. A promise can be copied. It can be forced. It can be spoken for another person." Understanding reached him. "Then choose the word." Josephine rose and crossed to the type cabinet. Her mother's composing stick lay beside the spacing rule, the repaired thumbscrew moving smoothly beneath her fingers. She selected each letter and set the line with deliberate pressure. "Josephine Avery and Tobias Mercer have chosen to marry in September." Tobias remained on the other side of the table, near enough to read when she turned the stick upright, far enough that his hand did not cross over hers. "Chosen," he said. "Is it necessary?" Josephine tightened the final space. "It is the only word that matters." His mouth curved. "Not triumph, recognition. Then print it. Before I do, we settle the arrangement." "I expected we would. Where will we live? Where do you want to live?" "That is the beginning of an answer, not the answer," Tobias considered. "Iron Lark needs me most nights. The Clarion needs you here most mornings. We can keep your room above the office for press nights and make the ranch house ours the rest of the week. Or keep both until we learn what works. My name remains Avery in the masthead. Yes. My accounts remain mine. Yes. Iron Lark pays the posted printing rate. Illy would rebel if it received special treatment. The north room becomes a workroom only if I decide it should." "Yes." Josephine narrowed her eyes. "You have already considered the north room. It has the best morning light. You measured the windows. In December. Without asking." "I measured a window. I did not move a chair." Laughter escaped her. 6 months earlier he might have mistaken that laugh for permission to decide the rest. Now he waited. Josephine reached across the table and placed her ink-marked hand over his. "Then we will try both places and correct what does not fit." His palm turned beneath hers. "That sounds less romantic than a lifelong vow. It sounds more durable." "I have learned not to argue with durable." Josephine transferred the engagement line into the galley, proofed it, corrected one uneven space, and locked it into the lower column of Saturday's front page. Tobias watched the announcement settle among cattle weights, Ruth's report on a new milliner, and the school levy correction. Their future would not replace the life around it. It would enter that life truthfully. "May I kiss you?" he asked. Josephine lifted one eyebrow. "You have been given my answer and still ask, especially now." "Why?" "Because September does not own April." She caught the front of his coat and pulled him toward her. "Then stand still." He did. Josephine kissed him with the familiarity of a woman who no longer feared that closeness would cost her authority. His hands settled at her waist only after she leaned nearer. Warmth, restraint, choice renewed in the present rather than borrowed from the future. When they parted, his forehead rested against hers. "Wednesday next?" he asked. "Bring corrected cattle tallies. And lunch? Only if the apples improve, a severe condition." "You agreed to my terms." "I am still agreeing." That afternoon, after the engagement notice had been printed, Josephine reset one clean copy of the line in her mother's brass composing stick and left it there beneath the spring light. The Clarion's front page carried honest weights, a school board correction, local notices, and no portrait of a lonely rancher waiting to be claimed. Beneath the counter, the smudged proof and sealed first-line packet remained locked apart from the 6 original letters that still belonged to 6 women. On the work table above them, Tobias's hand rested beside Josephine's, never over it, while the brass composing stick held the first public promise no one else had written for either of them.